All right, y'all. So we unfortunately had to skip over a couple of topics that we had going the last couple of weeks. So I appreciate your patience and understanding. But we're going to go ahead and jump into education today, which kind of has been the underlying theme throughout the whole semester anyway, because you've come to learn that there are a lot of things that you did not learn through your K through 12 schooling, as far as what you're learning for many of you for the first time this semester. So we're really going to dig in deeper a little bit more into the education system, and we have two experts here with us today, these two hermanos, brothers, that are going to share some knowledge with us. So you all already know Chris Silvas, who was with us before, and he talked to us about the Zapatista movement and some of his experience with that. So he's back with us today because, as you know, he's also been in education for a long time. So I'm going to read his bio, which is more aligned with what we're going to talk about today. So for Chris Silvas, over a 27-year career in education, he has worked in elementary school and high school. He has been as substitute and certificated teacher, a teacher on special assignment for intervention, and an administrator both at regular high school and continuation school. He currently has served as a high school principal for 5 years. Okay, thank you again for being with us, Chris. And then we also have Beto Gutierrez, right? Gutierrez? Yes, Beto. And I'm going to give you a more proper introduction when it's your turn to speak. But everyone, we have Chris and Beto with us today, and I'm going to hand it off to Chris for now. We'll open it up for Q&A for Chris, and then we'll transition over to Beto. Okay, so go ahead, Chris. Thank you for being with us.
Okay, so can you all hear me? Okay. Yeah. So thank you for having me again here. Last time I was here, I talked about the Zapatista movement. Today I'm talking a little more about my day-to-day world, which is as an educator, as a principal in a secondary school, in a high school. Really the subject today is to talk about how it is that you probably have learned a little bit about the civil rights movement in this class, I'm going to assume. And you probably heard a little bit about how the civil rights movement has influenced change. One of the things that was a big demand of the civil rights movement was inclusion of specifically of people of color, Chicanx, Latinx people in positions of leadership. And my subject today is really to talk about how, to some extent, that's happened, but it hasn't always resulted in success. Sometimes you see that schools don't succeed, even when they have leadership that reflects some of those values and some of those desires of the 60s. So we accomplished getting people of certain experience and certain representation into leadership positions, but that hasn't always translated into success. And I want to give a couple of ideas from my own point of view as a principal, why that's true and what it means. And I know you're going to say, well, wait a minute, you're a principal. Why are you saying this about schools? Because you have to be honest about schools to understand how they can work if they're going to work for people like us. And I say that very specifically, if they're going to work for people like us, you have to understand what they are, what they were designed for, and then what they do. To make some decisions about the extent to which they can help us. So I have a brief presentation. We'll just, somebody just poke at me when we get about to do about 15 minutes, because I want to make sure that I leave plenty of time for Beto to talk about. And some of the things I'm going to talk about are going to lead into what I'm sure he's got prepared in terms of talking about what the net impact is of schools that fail on people like us. How's everybody doing today, by the way? I'm good?
Good.
I'm cool? That's good news. So why do schools with Chicanx leaders still fail? Like, why do those schools still not succeed? This was a demand, a specific demand of the civil rights movement. We'll have people that look like us in these positions of leadership. But why do schools in those situations still not meet the needs of every kid. And it's my position that schools should be judged on their ability to meet the needs of every kid. They should not be judged on their ability to meet the needs of 10% of the kids or 15% of the kids or even half the kids. Schools should be judged on their effectiveness in meeting the needs of every kid who walks in the door, every single one. And yes, there are kids who don't come ready and kids who come with their levels of immaturity and they come with, trauma and pain about their life, and it doesn't make them great students. But it's still the school's responsibility to meet the needs of every kid who wanders onto the campus. And they don't always do that. And I want to address that really quick. Even when they've got leaders that look like me or that look like people like me. And I'm focusing on Chicanx leaders today because that's my experience, but you could substitute POC leaders, people of color from different backgrounds, from different experiences, and you would still have some of the same questions. So real quick, what are your experiences with Chicanx principals and other leaders? And the second part, did their efforts make any difference with the school's expectations or performance? So somebody who wants to, go ahead and unmute, talk about your experience with leadership at your high school who were self-identified Chicanos, Chicanas, self-identified Latinos, Latinas, self-identified Hispanics, or whatever words they were using. What are your experiences with that? And then the second question, did their efforts make any difference with the school expectations or performance? Don't be shy.
I mean, I have one teacher, but he wasn't Hispanic, but he was African American. And we had a group in our high school, and it was for African American, but everybody was allowed to join and be a part of. He identified himself as an African American individual, and he brought in many different activists of African American descent. And it was really interesting to see it at a young age, at like 15, and seeing that in their eyes that we matter, and they're showing that to us. And it's really interesting because my school was basically prominently white. And so my teacher, he brought that in to make us feel, like more accepted, and I feel like that was just amazing. Like, I feel he did make a change in the school because after I left, the organization kept going and went to other schools. Like before our school, it was in another school, but our school, I feel like it made the diversity a little bit better for other schools. So I know, because I live in San Fernando Valley, and I think Calabasas school started doing it after our school. So that's a predominantly white school. So it's good to see another school that's doing that to make other kids that are of color feel, they feel like they are cared for. And I think it's really cool that teachers do that now.
Excellent. And he wasn't a principal, but was he supported by the school administration?
Yes, he was. I think he was a dean.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so he had some type of superiority over.
Got it. Anybody else want to share? What are your experiences with Chicanx or people of color as principals and other leaders? And did their efforts make a difference with the school's expectations or performance?
I can go.
Oh, okay, go ahead. And then Kaylee, are you able to unmute yourself so that you can go after? Because I like your comment in the chat, but I'd love to hear your voice. But go ahead, Brianna.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna say I had one teacher who was a part of our AVID program, and usually teachers who are in AVID work a lot with a lot of first generation students going into college. And so I just remember one teacher in particular, he was Chicano, and he was really proud about it and always speaking about it. And I noticed that even people who weren't from any type of person of color background, they were really drawn to him because they learned a lot from him, and they appreciated his efforts towards other kids. And it kind of brought together both sides, I guess you could say, the kids who were more I guess you could say on the wealthier side, and the kids who were just working really hard to get to the same advantages and have those same opportunities. And so I noticed, at least for our school, it was like really like supplemental, and like it made a really big difference. And like these kids who, like, especially myself, because I was an avid, enjoyed coming to school early in the morning and like kind of picking through like, oh, like what scholarships should I apply to, and like what types of speakers were coming in and out of school. So I think for us it was really beneficial.
Excellent. There was one more comment, I guess.
Oh yeah, so I had a Chicano principal in high school, along with a lot of teachers. I mean, I went to Rio Mesa. It's a school with a Spanish name. I mean, you'd expect a lot of Chicano or Spanish speaking people
Not
there.
always, but okay.
And so I think that just having a Chicano principal really changed the dynamics of school. Like before, it was much more strict and there was kind of a punishment system. But when he came, he stopped looking at like all of, what's good or bad. And he focused on what people brought to the school and seeing how they could counsel each other, like counsel home problems, mediate between different students instead of just moving to expelling somebody for doing something wrong. And so I think that really changed school dynamics because people weren't scared of getting in trouble anymore or people like judging them for who they are.
Excellent. Okay, so that's an example of him bringing some cultural assets to the table that mattered for the school and made a difference for kids. That's great news. I'm glad to hear that. I know there may be some other comments, but I want to stick to the time. So I'm going to move forward. Why did schools get assigned Chicanx principals and other leaders in the first place? Like what transformed that? Are there any benefits to assigning Chicanx principals and other leaders to schools? And I think you, Kaylee, started to talk about it a little bit. And if schools are not doing well, even though they have these leaders, why is that true? So first of all, how many of you have ever heard of the 1968 East LA walkouts?
This is
Put a
one
ball
of
in here, there you
a lot
go.
of you.
Awesome.
A lot of you turned in a film review for the walkout film, so that's what he's referring to.
So students left school. I know it's ironic. They left school to improve school. They walked out of school to make school better. But they walked out of schools because they were concerned about the conditions in the schools where they went to school. So they walked out because they wanted to bring attention to the lack of programming in their schools, the lack of concern for them to become college eligible, the lack of bilingualism in the schools. If you just take a look at these two images real quick, you see kind of the, what sorts of things kids were saying. And there's you can't see it too well in the Abraham Lincoln High School protest there, but there's somewhere in the back there's a sign that says schools not prisons, and that's going to come up again in a second. So those issues have always been kind of around. You see, again, kids, younger than you, a little younger than you, protesting to try to get schools to be different. So I took this from an LA Times article, which is going to be referenced in this PowerPoint, and I'll send it to your teacher and you can have it and check it out yourself. And this is just something that was mentioned in the article. At a Rosh's school board meeting 10 days into the protest, students presented 36 demands. Some seemed excessive: only pass-fail grades, student lounges with jukeboxes, Mexican dishes in the cafeteria prepared by local mothers, which is not a terrible idea, by the way. Others were very basic: smaller classes, new libraries, and I've put this in red: more bilingual counselors, teachers, and principals. Improved testing to distinguish between a lack of English proficiency and a lack of intelligence. More lessons on Mexican-American culture, art, and history, and no corporal punishment. So one of the demands was, we want to see people like us having decision-making, having agency and decision-making authority in schools. That's what they wanted to see. Moving forward, is there a benefit to that? We'll look at a couple of schools in a second, but this is from another article, and again, it'll be in the presentation, which you can look at later. And this is from an article talking about the importance of having diverse school leaders. Diverse school leaders are more likely to bring perspectives of cultural competence and forms of capital which are highly regarded by families and communities, and specifically within immigrant communities. These assets allow diverse school leaders to be cultural straddlers, enabling them to move within and across multiple environments. For example, one study showed that Latino school leaders can prompt Latino parents to change their view of schooling experience, which I don't know if I agree with completely, which results in high family and community engagement. These forms of cultural capital allow school leaders to foster stronger engagement with students and families, improving student outcomes and community engagement. And I believe this, and I think, Katie's comment speaks to this exact capacity, the ability for somebody with some cultural literacy to be able to come into a school, better understand the needs, better understand how to communicate in a way that makes sense for kids, and then increase engagement, increase capacity. And again, going back to what I said at the beginning, I believe it is the duty of every school to teach every single kid, not 10%, not 50%, not 70%, all kids. So what if that doesn't happen? How can that still happen when there are a number of, although this study does state, this particular study states that across the country, 80% of school leaders are still white males. 80% across the country are still white males. It might be a little different maybe in like a district where I'm at or certain places, but you look at the whole country, it's very monolithic, homogenous white males as principals and school leaders. So I took 3 of the schools, just real quick, 3 of the schools where walkouts took place. Roosevelt Senior High School, the principal is Rose Ann Ruiz. Abraham Lincoln Senior High School is Principal Ben Gertner. And James A. Garfield Senior High School, the principal is Andres Favela. Now, I don't know their background, but certainly it seems like at least 2 of these principals come from a background that more reflects the community. I don't know anything about these principals. None of this should be like a criticism of these principals or their administration or their work, but I just picked 3 schools that happen to be in that same schools where kids walked out because they wanted to see change. They wanted to see a difference in how schools perform. And at least 2 of those schools, that remains true now. How about their performance? How are they doing? Anyone want to make a prediction? No offense to anybody, no offense to these principals. Anyone want to make a prediction?
Well, I know because my cousin graduated from Garfield a couple years ago. I know Garfield's doing pretty good right now, and a lot of my family has gone to Garfield, so I know the history of it.
The Bulldogs are doing pretty well. We'll look at that in a second.
I think Roosevelt is, I'm not sure, because I used to play like Roosevelt, and I remember when I was there, their school wasn't doing the best, but I mean, it could have changed because I know a lot of schools branched off from being LOSD to be more charter.
So Roosevelt, that's a good point, because Roosevelt Senior High School actually broke up into a kind of a charter piece, and then a public ed piece. We're looking at the public ed piece in a second here, not the charter piece.
Okay.
So, but I'm saying that's an excellent point. Thank you for pointing that out. So let's look how they perform. Let's just take a quick look. So Roosevelt's graduation rate is 74.3%. That means 1 out of 4 kids do not graduate at Roosevelt Senior High School.
Wow.
Their suspension rate is 1.3%, which is actually relatively low compared to the state. The state's average is about 3.5. And then college and career ready. That is, you've completed AP courses, you've completed IB courses, you've passed the tests, you've gotten 3 or better on the AP exam, stuff like that, 22.7%. Or you've completed a college or career pathway. Abraham Lincoln Senior High School, 82% graduation rate, 0 suspension rate. They suspended nobody the last year information was provided. Their college and career readiness rate, 41.9%. James A. Garfield Senior High School, graduation rate, 93.9%, 0 suspensions, 57.2 college and career readiness. Those are pretty good numbers as far as the numbers go, not as good as schools that are more affluent, which is a whole problem in itself. But certainly it's tough to know if there's a Chicano leader, does that mean the school's going to succeed? And just looking at this little tiny sample, it's not clear that that's true. So I would say you need to look at schools more carefully and more closely to find out the extent to which failure happens even though you have leaders that reflect these 1960s goals. So I'm going to suggest some stuff which you may or may not agree with, but for me as a principal, these are things I've seen up close and personal in terms of the ways in which schools service or disservice kids. Most of you, if you made it to Cal State, Channel Islands, you probably did okay at school. You probably were successful at one level or another, but you probably know at least 2 students your same age did the exact same things that did not. And we have to wonder, well, what's happening in schools to make that so? So I would say that, yes, there's a benefit to having a leader who has the cultural competency to understand you as a kid, the teachers, the community. But there's some other pieces that have to happen in combination with that to meet the goal of meeting the needs of every kid in the school. So let's take a look. And I'm going to say this out loud, even though I'm a principal. Schools filter, they don't build bridges. I want you to take a second and think about that statement. They don't build bridges. They filter. When you filter something, it's like you get out all the good stuff, and then all the stuff you don't want stays in the filter, and oh my gosh, it gets put in the trash or something else happens to it. Schools filter. They don't build bridges. So what are some like specific examples of what that looks like? Okay, I'm up here in the top right corner. Schools focus on what you remember, not what you practice. If you can remember, how many of you, just by putting your hand up, either putting your hand up in your image or putting your hand up for using the reaction button, how many of you had a teacher that just lectured? They just lectured and lectured and lectured and lectured and lectured, and you never really got to do any of the, I see 2 hands in the air, oh my gosh. Lecture and lecture and lecture, and then by the time they got around to just figuring out whether you actually knew the stuff, they had already been talking for 20 minutes. Now, there are some kids who thrive in that environment. They're okay, right? We had a few aviders out there. Focus notes, right? You know how to take focus notes, right? Okay, well, not all kids know how to take focus notes. Yes, if you're an avid, you get some support, but not all kids know how to take focus notes. So if you can do that, pretty autonomically, you're probably going to succeed. Well, what if you can't? You probably give up. Oh, are you kidding? I can't keep up with this guy, whatever. I'm not going to do it. Schools focus on high-profile academic programs. And I'm gonna leave AVID separate because I think AVID is a program that specifically is looking for kids who are struggling to get them in a place where they can go to college. How many of you have had an AP program at your high school? How many of you had an IB program? Some other specialized program that everyone cared about. Oh my God, the kids in this program, Project Lead the Way kids are so awesome. Kids in this program are so awesome. So it looks like the school's doing great because like, oh, look at these kids in the calculus class and they're doing this and that. That doesn't always tell you how all the kids are doing. Because there are some kids who aren't in a program. They're not an AVID. They're not in an AP class. They're not an IB. They're not in a career pathway. They're just kids who come to school. What is being done to support those students? And I don't know that you can tell if a school is really zeroed in on these high profile programs. I don't know that you know how other kids are doing. I'm gonna go down to this bottom left. Schools track students they don't think will make it. Schools track kids they don't think will make it. So I was doing a WASP visit at a school that I won't mention. And that's an accreditation visit. You go to the school, you read the report, you comment on how they're doing. Where they told me that all of the kids that were in the culinary program, oh, well, they're going to struggle in English, because they're kids that just, they have problems and whatnot. So I said, time out. So let me make sure I understand what you just said. Did you just tell me that for a fact that the kids who go to the culinary program are there and they're struggling in their English class? Well, that's not exactly what I said. I mean, what I meant was, he basically told me we pushed all the kids who we thought weren't going to have that much success in the culinary program because that's where we thought they could succeed. Those kids are being tracked. That doesn't mean that they couldn't have success in the culinary program. It just means that you're kind of like pre-predicting the outcome. Like, oh, well, let's put them in the culinary program because they might have success there. Well, how do we know they wouldn't have success in something else? That's tracking. That's you deciding, it's you predetermining the outcome. What's going to happen to that kid? Going down to the bottom right, we're almost done. Schools teach compliance as a virtue. Schools teach compliance. You need to be compliant. This is important. You need to repeat back the things that I said in the order I said it to show me that you're really paying attention. Why? Why is that important? I don't think it's that important, but we teach compliance as a culture. We expect kids to be compliant. Well, what if I'm not compliant? What if that's difficult for me? What if what you're saying doesn't match my experience? What you're saying right now doesn't match what I experienced as a kid, but you expect me to repeat that because that's the expectation. These are all filters. These are all ways of filtering kids. Filtering out the kid who can't take focus notes because that's a new experience for them. Filtering out the kid who, for whatever reason, has stuff to do and can't do that IB program. Tracking the kid because you think, well, they're not gonna have success, so let's put them over here. Expecting compliance and pushing away the kid who isn't gonna be compliant. And then this last one here, which may be a little more controversial, but I've seen it up close and personal. Schools embrace the culture of pobrecito. Oh, it's so hard for kids. It's really hard for them. I'm going to give them extra credit that has nothing to do with the learning, just to give them extra credit so they can pass the class. Because we want them to pass the class and graduate. And we do want them to pass the class and graduate. But do we do that by lowering our expectations? Because we do it all the time. In schools, we do it all the time. We lower expectations to help kids out. The kid probably, he's really smart. He could probably do the honors class, but things are really hard for him. I don't think we should push him and really challenge him to be in the honors class. Well, why not? If you said he could do it, why wouldn't you push him? It's not just high expectations, it's support that goes with it. Like, what support are you providing so that kid who you think has the capacity, they can complete the honors course? Like, what support is being offered on a regular basis so that kid can achieve at the highest level? My vision for a high school is that every kid leaves ready. That doesn't mean every kid goes to college, because you don't have to. Every get more training if they need it, or every kid leaves with the ability to go to college if they choose it. Every kid leaves knowing the programs that are available for the things that are of interest to them, and that they have a knowledge about how to do the pre-professional training so they can do the thing they want to do. We owe that to every kid. 100% every kid. Schools need to meet the needs of every kid. And all of this can happen even if your principal speaks Spanish. All of this can happen even if your principal, has a great rapport with the community and the kids really like them. These things can still happen in that school. So I would say this to you, kind of in closing. Yes, it's important that we get representation of people from our communities in the leadership of schools. But that's not a guarantee that the school's going to meet the needs of every single kid, as it should, as it's expected to. And that's something we have to wrestle with. Now, what you're going to hear from in a moment is what happens when schools don't meet every kid's needs. Like, what are the consequences when schools push kids out because the kid isn't compliant, or push kid out because the kid can't keep up, because the kid's working a job to keep their apartment? What happens to that kid when schools don't provide enough support and they're not zeroed in on being a bridge and not a filter? So with that, I'm just, the last thing is I'm going to include in the presentation just a couple of the articles that I referenced and a couple of the pieces of information that I referenced. As I said the last time I was here, question everybody, including me. If you saw something in the presentation right now, you want to say, you know what? Let me ask you something, Mr. Principal. I don't believe that. Please do. By all means, please do. That tells me you're listening and that you have your own mind and you can challenge things. Okay, so that's really all I wanted to present, and I wanted to just leave whatever balance of time I have for questions or comments or anything like that.
Okay, so we do have maybe a couple of minutes for Q&A, and there's a lot of really great conversation going on in the chat. So students, anyone want to share a comment or ask a question? And I
As
do,
I said,
and I do want to point out, right, and Chris did a really good job at being specific about this, but just always remember that it isn't always just about having a Chicana or Chicano principal and then it just solves all your problems, right? Like they have to have so many things to bring to the table in order to make it work, right? Not just being culturally competent or proficient or really tied in with the community, but understanding leadership, understanding academic excellence, understanding how to put together a really good school environment, a supportive school environment. There are a lot of factors. So it's not just one thing, it's many things that it takes to make a school successful for all students. So just keep that in mind. But you all have a lot of good discussion and questions going on in the chat. So I urge you to use your voices.
Yeah, I wanted to go off of what Fatima was saying about like the military and how they would always come to like our high schools and stuff. Like they would literally pick out the odd ones out, and like they knew who were the ones that are most likely not going to achieve, or like they would know. Like I feel like the schools would like give them a list of people and just be like, okay, yeah, you go to them, like pick them out. Like they did it with my brother, and my brother's really intelligent. He went to UC Santa Barbara, and they would always go to my brother and ask him, hey, do you want to join the army and do this and that? And then like even when he was with his group of like white friends, they would always pick him, always talk to him, always do something. And that's when my mom was like fed up with it. She's like, no, this is not, like, you're not doing this. Like my brother would always come home and with like, like military like pamphlets and stuff, and my mom was like, no, you're not gonna do this. Like you're intelligent, you can go to school. And she finally like complained about it and said something about it, and they said they can't do anything about it because they just go and pick whatever they want. But like they go and pick the ones that they know that they're easy to target because their family is not going to say something. But my mama is Caucasian, so she will say something, so she knows that her voice will be heard. So if it's like another person that isn't white, then their voice might not likely be heard. But it's sad because it has to come down to that. And that's something that it shouldn't come down to. And as well, I wanted to point out how you were saying about the teachers and like schools, they don't teach, they filter. And that's so right. I've literally been saying that for so many years, but no one was saying anything and no one would like agree with it. But then like you actually go into these schools and you see them do these things, and it's like, it's so sad. Like they place these children or teenagers in classes that they're not going to succeed in, but then you see another school like doing like avid and all that, they're doing really well. So all these schools that are like poor or in poverty like areas, they're not doing good. They filter out the ones that are not going to accomplish things. And it's sad because you shouldn't put that in a school system. And I feel like that all depends on the government and how the government is going to like not endorse, but invest into the schooling system. And it's how Jacob said, it's toxic. It is toxic. And growing up like that, because I was a student that was in special ed, and my teachers never taught me anything. I had to teach myself basically in school. And that was something that was really hard, because when I went into college, I was so scared to go to college, because I thought I wasn't ready. I thought I was stupid. I was dumb. Until my mom pulled me aside saying, hey, you're not stupid and you're not dumb. You just need time. You need to learn. Like you are you. Don't let a disability bring you down. Because my teachers, they would literally treat me like a baby. And schooling, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to gradually grow as an individual. And that's something that a lot of the schoolings do with special education students. I just want, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for sharing. Beto, you wanted to say something?
I want to say that I think that it's important to remember that schools were never designed or intended to prepare us for college, right? They were designed to take us out of the labor market, and that was it. The Constitution does not guarantee you a good education. When the Constitution was written, we didn't have public schools. We didn't have we didn't have school districts. The state constitutions also don't guarantee a quality education, which is why schools are able to get away with it, right? It more than anything, schools, and even today the discussions around about opening up the schools, it's a daycare service really for adults to go to work and to keep the teenagers out of the labor market, to keep them from taking the jobs away from the adults, and then being abused along the way by the market, by the bosses, right? So it was never intended, and right now we're going through a transition. We're finally saying, hey, we need to hit the reset button. Something hasn't been working. This is a different world. We're now in competition with kids from China, from India, like they're coming over here, and they're outperforming us worldwide. We're being outperformed in reading and science and math and English. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have no standard in education anymore. It's standardless. As a teacher, and I've taught at every level of public education, from high school, continuation schools, prisons, adult prison, juvenile prison, community college, the Cal State system, the UC system. We don't have a standard in education. I had a student at UC Santa Barbara tell me, "You can't make me read. I pay for your salary." I'm like, what? Like, this is someone at a research university who's going to be an expert in something, and it's telling me that I can't reinforce reading somehow because she pays for my salary.
Wow.
So we're in a really transition period, but we're also driven by this consumer mentality that you work for me and I get to do whatever I want while I'm there.
Yeah.
Right? What are you doing as a teacher? What are you doing? What are you doing to accommodate? What are you doing to accommodate? And it always falls on the teacher.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the biggest, problems that we have. Accountability it's not shared. And so I'll give you an example really quick. Last semester, we had an IEP meeting. A student was failing. The student is addicted to his smartphone. He spends about 11 hours a day using a smartphone. And the student, like at the very last ditch, when the mother realized that the kid was just not going to pass the class, she said, "Well, what are you doing to accommodate him?" And I said, "Well, your son is addicted to the phone. He weighs about 100 pounds. He's 5'11". He's in the 12th grade. But he has 10th grade credits, and you're asking me what am I doing to accommodate him? He has an addiction problem. Do you want me to do his work? Like, that's really the only thing that's left here." And the mother was just trying to put it all on me, the teacher, and it's like, your kid has an addiction with the phone. What are you doing as a mother to help with that? Right? So I think that we're going through a really difficult transition period, and it's going to take a couple more years, but when I was working on my doctoral dissertation, what I found out is that students have more rights than teachers, which also complicates things because we are not hired to teach the curriculum that we think would suit the student. We are hired to deliver the curriculum that the state designed to meet, for the student. So we're a mouthpiece. When they hire me, they don't quiz me to see if I know my history. They don't quiz me. They don't test me. If you have a degree, they throw you into the class. Right? We have a lot of people that have serious mental health issues that should not be in education. But we don't have a filter. If you want to be a prison guard, you have to take a psychology test. If you want to be a teacher, that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Beto, for adding to the discussion. Does anyone have any last questions or comments for Chris before I properly introduce Beto? Anyone?
I was gonna actually mention something.
Yeah.
About that mindset, the pobrecito mindset. I think that's so true because I remember at I think sophomore years when you can start taking AP classes, or junior year, I don't remember, but I remember my counselor not telling me I literally couldn't do them, even though I had A's and my college prep classes and stuff like that. And I was I took honors in middle school, what is. Yeah, and she didn't want me to. And I ended up going to another counselor who happened to be Hispanic, and he was like, why is this person not letting you? That's absolutely dumb. I ended up taking APs, doing really well. And same thing, because this person was like my designated counselor. I wanted to do the ROP program, get my CNA license, and she told me no, because that's only for kids who aren't going to college after high school. And I
Wow.
was, so one, you're making a comment about those other kids, and two, it actually, like, I didn't get to do the deadline on time. So now in college, I'm like trying to apply to nursing. I had to get my CNA license and pay money for it. It's honestly so weird. And like, I just like connected the dots like all at the same time right now, because I was like, it's true. Like, it really is true.
That's terrible. But you're here, and that's awesome that you found a way, right? But it isn't fair that we have to figure out how to jump through all these loops, how to navigate the system that is set up against people of color, and then they go out and say, well, you made it, so no one else should have an excuse, right? If you can do it, everyone else can. But it isn't fair that we have to do that with so many barriers in our way, right? And then we have people within the system that are supposed to be there to help us, creating more barriers. And that isn't right. That isn't fair. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Beto. Beto is a first-generation immigrant from Zacatecas. His family settled in Los Angeles, and Beto was forced to attend and navigate the bureaucracies of LAUSD. Upon graduating high school, he attended the local community college, and it was there that he decided to become an educator. Beto has since earned an MA in urban planning and a PhD in urban education at UCLA. Beto has taught at comprehensive public high schools, community college, CSU Northridge, UC Santa Barbara, and 2 state prisons. Beto has published several peer-reviewed articles and op-ed pieces on the topic of prisons and school-to-prison pipeline. Beto's currently writing a book based on his 4-year teaching experience inside California's most notorious state juvenile prison. Welcome, Beto. Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How much time do we have, Beto?
This class session ends at 4:15, so you have about 30 minutes, including Q&A.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to share a little bit about my interest in this topic, because it's one of those dark topics that took me there. When I was 17 years old, it was 30 years, November 30th, that I actually survived a homicide shooting I survived a shooting that led to 1 homicide and two other injured people. I'm stuttering here. I don't know. I didn't think it was going to be an issue for me to talk about this. Anyhow, it's been 30 years, and November 3rd, I see it as my second birthday, right? It's been 30 years that this young man, he was 15 years old. He was shot in the head. The bullet came in and exploded and just blew out his brains. And I was the person who attended him because no one wanted to touch him. I was the one that was putting pressure until the paramedics got there. That happened on a Friday night. Monday morning, I went back to school, and the principal pulled me into the office, and she knew what had happened the week before. Of course, police reports were in, and it was gang related. And so she calls me into the office, and she says, I heard what happened this weekend. Are you okay? And I said, of course, yes, I'm okay. And what she was really doing, she didn't care about me. She was testing the waters to see if there was other tension that was building inside the school as a result of that shooting, because the shooters were also students at the high school. And so she was more than anything trying to see if I was gonna, but they were all arrested over the weekend. So the actual shooters were not gonna be in class that Monday morning. She then said to me, okay, well, go to class and let me know if I could help you with anything, which at the time, it's like, go to class means you're on your own, and that really, like, in retrospect, that really got me to think about, like, what do you do with kids that are exposed to violence, whether it's violence on the streets or violence at home? I've seen social workers go to school and take kids out of the school, remove kids. I've seen probation officers go to school and arrest students. And so many transactions between the state and the local schools happen in the school district or in the schools. But very little of the opposite, which is the rehabilitation and the healing and all of that, right? So when I was in the PhD program, when I was in the master's program, I researched the topic of prisons, the use of prisons to revitalize non-metropolitan economies. And so Bill Clinton and his administration actually used prisons to improve local economies. So in Central California, in a lot of these like really small farming communities where there weren't that many jobs, what they did is they built prisons, because now prisons, we're going to bring in these high paying jobs as guards and nurses and, you know, wardens and all of that stuff. And so the entire Central Valley, like it just grew because of the prison system. So that was when I was working on my master's program. Then when I got to the PhD program, what I did is I looked at the impact of community violence in student learning, right? And I already had the foundation and my experience of researching the prisons and all of that stuff as an urban planner. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share. Can everyone see this? Okay.
Yes.
So I was looking for the lowest performing schools. I was looking for the lowest performing schools in LA County, and they were right here. These are the green dots. And these lowest performing schools, these are the lowest performing middle schools. And so what stood out for me is that the 10 lowest performing middle schools are all located in what is this region of South Central LA. And all of those little red dots, I then looked at homicides, and I mapped out all of the homicides from 2007, January 1st of 2007 to April 4th of 2010. I got tired of counting dead bodies, right? So I stopped on April 4th of 2010. It was the most depressing research that I've ever conducted. And so could you imagine attending school where all of these shootings are happening on a regular basis, right? So I zoom in a little bit more. And these are the schools. I went and I drove in by these communities, and all of these spots like this right here, these are all like commercial centers, and you have freeways, and this is a golf course. USC, I think it's located right here, right? And so in these areas, so what this tells me is that the homicides are happening in front of people's homes. They're not happening in some dark alley where there's a lot of factories or warehouses or anything like that, right? When you look at these middle schools, right, within 1.5 miles of Henry Clay Middle School, they had 51 homicides during that time period, 3 years and a quarter, right? Can you imagine living here next to Carver, attending Carver Middle School, 114 homicides within 1.5 miles, right? Like, that's insane. How does that compare to the San Fernando Valley? These are the 10 lowest performing middle schools in the San Fernando Valley, right? And this is what it looks like. You know, consider 114 homicides. Here we have 24, 24, and 24. Now, I'll tell you right now, witnessing one homicide is traumatic in itself. I don't even want to hear the details of all of these others. So even this is going to be traumatic. When you don't know any different, even the 24, the 7, the 13, the 14, like all of these are going to be traumatic as well, right? But imagine what these kids have to go through, right? So then I looked at the schools, I looked at their suspensions and opportunity transfers. And it's really clear that it was really clear to me that the students from South Central are being suspended at a much higher rate. 3,451 suspensions in a single year, right? All of these schools combined, and mind you, 2 of the schools did not report their suspensions. So this is only from 8 schools. 8 schools suspended 3,451 students during the period of 1 year. What brings us to the topic of school to prison pipeline, right? School to prison pipeline is really the practice in which public schools collaborate with the juvenile hall system and the courts under zero tolerance policies. When I was a student, if you got into a fight, you get suspended and then you come back to school the next day and it's over, or 2 days later, right? Today they call the cops. Today they call the cops, they come in, they handcuff you, they take you away to juvenile hall or to the police department. And sometimes, you know, I've seen cops, two or three cops on campus at the same time, picking up 2 or 3 different students throughout the day. That became like zero tolerance, whether it was your fault or not. Like, you're going to be arrested for fighting, you're going to be suspended for fighting. It's like zero tolerance. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what that looks like. Oh, and the whole collaboration, right? Right now, I have a student. He was my student at the juvenile prison, and this young man, he recently contacted me, and he told me that he's facing 25 years to life. And I asked him, what do you mean you're facing 25 years to life? And he said, I'm being charged as an adult, and they're carrying over my 3 strikes from when I was a teenager. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? He's like, well, I got a strike for each of my victims. So the minute he said I got a strike for each of my victims, the first thing that came to my mind is, you must have really hurt someone to get 3 strikes as a juvenile, right? And so he kept saying, my victims. I got a strike for each of my victims. So he's going to court on December 16th. I finally asked him, I said, listen, why don't you take the state language away from the story and tell me exactly what happened? And he said, well, when I was 14 years old, I ran into a classroom and I got into a fight with the kid because he was mad dogging me. And because of that, they sent me to juvenile hall. And then when I was in juvenile hall, there was a riot. One of the kids figured a way to pop open the doors, the cells, and everybody ran out and they got into a fight. And they gave him a strike for each kid that he punched while he was in that riot. And I stopped and I said, listen, stop saying your victims, because when you say my victims, it makes it sound like you really hurt someone. I know what a 14-year-old fight looks like. I'm a trained boxer, and I've seen like fights, and I've seen like other fights. And then I just told him in a joking manner, I said, I bet you were probably some little fat kid who got your feelings hurt and you ran in and you started fighting and you probably were just rolling on the floor. And he started laughing and he said, that's exactly what happened. He's like, we didn't even punch each other. We were just rolling on the floor and the teacher broke us up. And for that, they sent him to juvenile hall. Now he's in juvenile hall. Some little travieso decided to go pop open the doors. They all ran out and got into a big old fight. They called it a riot. And they gave this kid 1 strike for each kid, for everyone that he hit. If he was in adult prison, all you do is get a write-up. You don't get a strike, you get a write-up. Right? And think about how the school allowed that to happen, the way the school facilitated that by allowing the cops to take this kid for really rolling on the ground. It wasn't a fight. They were just rolling on the ground is what happened. Right? And that is what the school to prison pipeline is, right? The over-reliance on law enforcement. I got into a lot of fights when I was a teenager, not because I wanted to, it was always in self-defense. But you're able to come back and then you pick up where you left off, right? You carry on with your life. Today, you're getting penalized for life. This kid has 3 strikes as a juvenile and that are carrying into his adult life, right? One last story. I sent out a student. I was teaching at San Fernando High School. And I sent a student to the dean's office because he was showing up like 20 minutes late with no books, no materials, and he was just cussing me out and disrupting my class. So I sent him to the dean's office, which is what you're supposed to do. And I get a note in my mailbox, and the dean wrote, he's like, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. It so happens that the court liaison was in my office when I received your note. So I gave a copy of your slip to the court liaison, and this will be presented to the judge next week when he goes to court. He's currently going to court next Wednesday." I'm not trying to get this guy sent to juvenile hall. I don't want the judge to read my note. That's not why I sent him out, right? At minimum, at maximum, we might have to bring his parents in and explain to the parents what's happening, right? But now you're bringing in the judges, you're bringing in, why don't we have psychologists? Why don't we have more therapists? Why don't we have more counselors? Why are we relying on judges, probation officers, and cops to take care of behavior problems that could have been resolved by us, the adults, right? If two of your kids at home fight, you don't call the cops on your kids. You break them up and you send them each to their room, and then you have a talk about it, and you settle things, and then it's over, and then you move on. But at the schools right now, they're relying, and it goes back to, and it was probably from my era, because we had a lot of fights during my era, but a lot of that was very like racial tension. There was white flight. A lot of immigrants started moving into these white communities, and people don't talk about the fight that happens before the flight. Okay, there was a lot of fights that happened, and they were very racially charged. And so there were other factors. It's not like you wanted to fight just to fight. It's not that. There were just a lot of factors played into it. But after my generation, they came down really hard on teenagers, on juveniles, with zero tolerance for just about anything, and all kinds of injunctions, gang injunctions, gun enhancements, all of these. So let me give you an example of what that looks like, right? A 17-year-old, one of my students at the prison, same thing. He got 5 years for attempted robbery. Think about it. Attempted robbery. He didn't rob anything. Attempted robbery, and they gave him 5 years at a state prison, right? At a state prison for attempted robbery. And I told him, what, like, is this possible? And I would go read the reports, because I thought these guys were like trying to, I don't know, like win me over or something, or lie to me or something. So I'd go read the reports, and I was like, my God, this is real. Like, he's not making it up. So they gave him 5 years because he was an ex-gang member who was still on files, or he was gang affiliated. And so they gave him 5 years for a gang enhancement. They gave him another 5 years for a gun enhancement. He had a gun, right? But he didn't rob anything. And even the owner from the store, he had the gun, but he didn't actually use the gun. He just had it on him. And so even the owner of the store went to court and said, I don't want him to go to jail. Like, if he didn't rob anything, everything's fine. You could let him go. But the judge had to impose the 5-year gang enhancement and the 5-year gun enhancement. And so one, it was not even a gang crime. It was this kid on his own doing something for himself. It wasn't gang activity. But the judges will throw the gun enhancement and the gang enhancement and all of that, right? So that is, in a nutshell, that is what the school to prison pipeline is, right? It's the collaboration of public schools, the over-reliance on probation officers, on the court system, on judges. It's a punitive way of dealing with something. If we look at how would you like to be a student at any one of these schools, and you get to class, and there was a shooting the night before. Like, think about what that does to your psyche. Like, I mean, some of us are hurt because our mothers yelled at us too much. We're mad. We're hurt because they threw the chancla at us for not washing the dishes or something. I mean, it's legitimately hurts our feelings, and we think that our parents. But think about being surrounded by this other type of abuse, and then you go to school, and you're expected to behave normal, right? You're expected to conform. You're expected to be able to study and do your homework. And where's your homework? Why didn't you bring your books? Like, you're a scatterbrain. The day after you witness something like this, you're a scatterbrain. Or just even hearing about it, just knowing it was your cousin, your neighbor. Imagine walking to school and seeing crosses everywhere and candles everywhere and flowers. South Central looks that way. It's like a morgue. It's like a giant cemetery. If you ever drive in through South Central, you'll see candles and flowers at every other corner. It's pretty bad. But it's pretty bad. This presentation was a lot bigger. I really condensed it for this, but I want to show you one last slide. And this one here shows the number of soldiers that were killed in Afghanistan when we invaded Afghanistan in 2001. to 2010, right? 1,359 soldiers. And then when you look at in Iraq, it's 4,000 soldiers combined. It's 5,789 during that 10-year. LA County alone, we have more people killed in LA County than the number of soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. Right? When you look at Southern California, 12,645 people were killed. Right? These were homicides. These are not like someone had a heart attack. Right? These are homicides. Someone was killed. They were killed, intentionally killed. Right? So the problem is grave. It is outside of the schools, and yet it has a direct effect inside the schools, and the students end up paying a huge price, right? Both emotionally, psychologically, and then of course, everything that comes with that, because then you end up with learning gaps in your knowledge as a result of that. And having experienced that firsthand, let me tell you, it doesn't just go away from one day to the next. So I will stop with that.
Thank you so much, Beto. Okay, students. So again, we want to hear your voices. You can please share any questions, comments, maybe something that you can relate to. But I want to hear your voices, and I'm looking at all of you.
Let me see a show of hands. How many of you know someone that went to juvenile hall? Those of you that are on. 2, 4. I mean, that's a very high percentage given the number of people with cameras on, right? Or you can give a thumbs up as well if you. If you know someone who, wow, here we go. All right, let's see, everyone at the same time, put like either a thumbs up or a hands up. You know someone that went to juvenile hall? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Out of how many people total? 10. That's a high percentage.
There's closer to like maybe 20 because we have 2 screens.
Oh, I didn't see the other screen.
Yeah. And then the other question that I like to ask students too is when you think about the school, there's these terms that we use like the dropout rate, but really it's a push out rate. Okay. And then another term is the achievement gap, but really it's an opportunity gap, right? It's the lack of opportunities that our schools are providing for our students that causes that gap, not the students' inability to achieve, because all students have ability to achieve something. It's just whether or not the schools and the teachers and the adults are providing the support that is needed in order for students to flourish, right? So we have to change like our mindset, right? There has to be a shift in the way we think, and even in the language that we use, because language is so powerful. So just know that it is not a dropout rate, it's a push out rate. It is not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity gap, okay? But here's another question for you. How many of you know somebody, whether any people that you went to school with or any of your relatives, whatever it may be, and again, use your little emoji thumb. How many of you know somebody who dropped out of school? Okay, and I'm gonna click between the screens there, so I see a lot of thumbs. Okay, there you go, they're coming. All right, so I'm gonna wait for those thumbs to disappear. It takes a little while. And I'm gonna ask you another question. How many of you know, other than your professors, people in your immediate circles that have gone on to school to receive a doctorate, a PhD? I see 1 hand, 2. Okay, maybe 3. That's a problem. Where the majority of us know people who have dropped out of school, and a very small number of us know someone with a PhD. That's a huge problem. Okay, but other questions and comments for Beto?
I would say that the bigger problem is that more of us know someone that went to juvenile hall or was incarcerated
Oh yeah.
than those with a PhD.
Yep.
Only because you have to be a little bit off the deep end to want to pursue a PhD sometimes.
That's a good point.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, I don't recommend it to people. I do it again, but I wouldn't recommend it to people.
Yeah, if you haven't already lost your mind, you'll lose it in the process of earning it. It's nuts. But still, go for it. Do it.
Right. You got to go get a hood for the hood. When you get a PhD, they hood you. I tell people, go get a hood for the hood. That's what it is, right? I just shared a link, and you can read my publications there. Like I said, I have like several op-ed pieces. I turned into a whistleblower while working for the juvenile prison. And I'm now suing the prison administrators, California Department of Corrections, the Division of Juvenile Justice, the Superintendent of Education. Yeah, they mess with the wrong person. They don't know that I'm single and I don't have kids and I live for this stuff. So I ended up filing a lawsuit against them because I was the college program coordinator, and they took the program coordinator position from me and gave it to a white woman who had a elementary school teaching credential. She shouldn't even have been teaching at that juvenile high school prison. And I had a 76% completion rate. Like 76% of the guys were passing their classes, which is high for a community college.
Mhm.
You know, but I got the buy-in, I built the relationships, and it was working fine. And I made it look so easy that they took it from me and gave it to this white woman who, within 6 months, she lost the whole thing, and only 10% of the guys were finishing. So anyhow, I turned into a whistleblower. I wrote a couple of pieces while I was still working inside. And then I wrote a few more afterwards, and I continue to write. But we've successfully managed to shut down the state prison, by the way. So Governor Newsom just signed a bill like a month or two ago, AB 823, I believe it is. And they're shutting down all of these state prisons, and counties now have to bring up their game, is what it comes down to. All counties have to bring up their game.
And so what does that mean? Like, are counties now going to make their jails larger, or are they putting systems in place to even prevent crime, to provide resources to communities?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
That every county is going to have the opportunity. Well, what it really means is that before, the counties were sending guys, they were supposed to send guys that were in for some serious crimes like homicides or rape, like serious crimes. You were supposed to send them to state facilities, but that's not what was happening. You had guys that were going in there for like attempted robbery, right? You had guys. So we shut down the entire state system, and now they are the counties have to develop programming and rehabilitation programs for guys that are committing these serious offenses. And then some counties took it to another level. LA County just hired someone to be the director of alternatives to incarceration. So LA County right now, they're doing like some cutting edge stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, like if you are ditching and they give you a ticket and then you don't go to court and now there's a warrant for your arrest, you shouldn't go to juvenile hall because you were ditching. You should, I don't know, like do something else. Like, but you shouldn't go to jail for that, you know? I don't know. Yeah, you shouldn't go to jail for that. If you get caught graffitiing, like
The school should be trying to figure out, why the kid's not going to school. Like what support can you provide so the kid can go to
Right.
school? That's what you're trying to get them to do.
But you know, you're always gonna have kids that are not gonna go to school no matter how much the school does, right? You're always gonna have that. I work at a continuation school. We'll always have that, right? I have like 10 moms that every day I text them, hey, your kid's not in class. Like the kids aren't showing up. Like you're always gonna have that, right? They still should not go to jail. Right? If you get caught graffitiing on a bus, you shouldn't go to jail for that. Clean the bus, right? Clean the bus. But right now we'll send you to jail and then we leave the bus still damaged. Clean the bus instead. You know, it doesn't make sense. If I steal your car, they send me to jail and then your insurance pays for your car. We shouldn't be that way. I should pay for the car. I should pay for the damages. I should work and go pay for the damages, and not go sit in a jail because that's not teaching me anything productive, right? I don't know. We need to change everything. I don't have the exact solution right now. I think that it's hard to come up with new ideas when we're so conditioned to see the world a certain way, and it takes time and conversations to come up with something different. But we are, like I said earlier, just with schools, we're also going through this very nice transition with the incarceration system, and I'm very happy to see that we were able to finally shut them down. Right? Arnold Schwarzenegger shut down 11 of them when he was in office. He's like, this doesn't make sense. He shut them down, and then now Gavin Newsom signed, and he shut down the other 3. Right? This is what they used to call CYA, California Youth Authority. They now call it DJJ. And so, yeah,
So
we're in transition, folks.
So I wanted to ask both of you, Beto and Chris, given everything that you're involved in, and I know students are still trying to look for attainable, simple enough, but yet impactful ways for them to be agents of change in any way that they can throughout the semester. So are there any projects that you all are working on that you could use a little bit of assistance from students to support? Let us know, because students are hungry for this right now.
I definitely will, because I actually planned this kid that's facing court on December 16th, right? He's facing 25 to life for rolling on the ground with a kid in his English classroom. Like, it's ridiculous. 14 years old.
Mhm.
You know, I'm actually I've been thinking about writing like op-ed pieces and writing letters, a letter campaign, you know, to the judge, to, like, it's ridiculous. So someone should not go to jail for that. Right.
Yeah.
If anything, the guards who allowed that 15-year-old kid to pop open all the doors, those guards should be fired for that. Like, how can a guard let, like, this is a juvenile, this is a juvenile hall. Like, how is it that they took over the whole system?
I was gonna say something about that. A lot of in the prison systems, guards look the other way. They don't say anything. They get paid under the table to do that. And that's
Absolutely.
something that's prominent in prison systems and in juvenile hall. Like they have
Absolutely.
people like it's just disgusting. Like, it, to me, prison systems is a joke in my eyes. Like, what they've been doing and recently, it's just they don't have it structurally done correctly. They have it structurally done racistly. And that's something that I really believe in, like, hardcore. Like, with my professors in college, they've taught me like all the prison like reforms and stuff of what they've been doing. It's sick. Like, they even like arrest people for being illegal immigrants and they sent them to prison. I was like, what? Like, you don't do that.
Right.
And it's just disgusting to me. It's just, it's a shocker to see that. And then America is letting that happen and no one's doing anything about it.
So 15 years ago, if you got caught and you were undocumented, they would just deport you the same day. They put you on a bus, they wait for the bus to be full, and they send you to TJ, and it's over. Today, we put you in a jail, right? And so it's because, and I actually wrote my very first publication, which you'll find in here. It's an academic peer-reviewed article. It's about Arizona, from Juan Cuervo to Jim Crow, or from Jim Crow to Juan Cuervo, something like that, right? In there, I actually talk about what, Taya, is that, did I pronounce your name correct?
It's Taya, but either way, it's
Taya. What Taya mentioned, right? And that is that we look for the most vulnerable population. And for the longest time, it was African-American Black men. They were the ones that are being targeted. And then when people caught on and said, hey, man, you're disproportionately incarcerating Black men, there's a problem, and you can't be doing that. And so the system kind of slowly backed off, and they said, okay, now we're going to focus on immigrants. And so right now, like, immigrants are the most vulnerable population. And even some Black people are like, well, as long as I'm not sitting in there, like, they shouldn't be here, right? Like, we find a justification the same way that people justified Blacks, men in the 80s who were addicted to heroin, who addicted to crack cocaine, right? A lot of that, it was the war on drugs. People needed rehabilitation. They didn't need to be sent to jail. And so now people are doing the same mental justification. Well, they know it's illegal. Why do they try to cross? We're just justifying it. But at the end of the day, what you have is you have private prisons who are making money by having these things, these institutions full, at full capacity. And so in Arizona, what they did is that they actually privatized all of their prisons. And then 6 months after that, or 9 months after that, they made all of the prisons private, right? It wasn't the Department of Corrections of Arizona. No, it was like private companies are now running the prisons. And then after that, they passed this very harsh immigration law that actually forced children to report their grandmothers. Like, if your grandmother's undocumented, you have to report your grandmother. And that was back in 2007, I think it was. And bus drivers had to report, and teachers had to report, and everyone was like, we're not reporting anybody. You know, I just want to bus drive my bus. I just want to teach my class. I don't want to report people. But that's what Arizona did. And they weren't doing it because they're anti-immigrant. Because look, if they were anti-immigrant, these same companies wouldn't be hiring people. They're not anti-immigrant. They're pro-money. right? These are private companies that get rich from having people sit in a prison, and you become your body becomes a unit, right? A unit, like anything can be a unit, right? Like you're sitting on a shelf, right? Your body becomes the unit by which they make money off of.
Definitely.
So yes, that's
it-
exactly what happened. But we transitioned from focusing on incarcerating Black people to now incarcerating immigrants.
Yeah. If you want to put your contact info, or does that link have your contact info?
Yeah, that link has my contact info. If you, I think you have to like sign up to access the documents, but it's free. And the cool thing about that is that you'll have access to free academic articles from like all kinds of, like thousands and thousands of academic articles. And you can follow, like, if you have like favorite writers, yep, it's on there.
Okay, so if you're interested in supporting the work that Beto's doing, just click on that link and make sure that you reach out, and then y'all can work out some details. And then Chris, if you want them to reach out to you as well, you can just put your contact info here if there's a project you're working on. If not, that's okay.
Ooh, right? Most of the stuff that they can make a difference on probably are not within the school itself, because the school, like I said, schools are tough. As Beto pointed out, schools are not necessarily designed for success. They're designed to filter. So really the heavy work is really, somebody was asking, well, what do you do? The heavy work is to push outside of school and outside of prison to say, this is how it should be. This is what the people expect from it, and use those mechanisms to influence how.
Yeah.
If anyone knows how to web design, we're right now we're looking for someone to develop a website, because we're gonna create a report card for all of the counties on how they handle juvenile issues. So if anyone has any web designers, yeah.
Okay, you reach out to him. And here's another thing too, if any of you, like I'm sure you have probably siblings or cousins or whatever that are still in the K-12 schooling system. So being an advocate for them is huge, and helping your parents and your tíos and your tías be advocates and showing them the ropes and how to navigate the school systems, that's huge. You could be an agent of change in that way. So bring it home and handle it that way. You can call into school board meetings, go onto their website and figure out when they're having their school board meetings, and if they're doing them on Zoom or however, and you can call in during public comment, and it could be something that's on the agenda or not on the agenda, just because you want to say something about the education system or whatever it might be. So all of those things make an impact, and have another friend or two call in too, so just be creative in the way that you can apply your agency. I don't want you to become too dependent for somebody to like totally script for you how to be an agent of change. You have to develop that and be creative, and just kind of, that should just be like a normal part of who you are, like just always being able to identify an injustice and then speaking about it, like calling it out, speaking truth to power. Like that just should be a normal thing that you're doing on a regular basis, not because we gave you 3 examples to go and do, you know what I mean? Like take those examples to get you started, but it should just become a regular part of who you are. Because if we don't do it, then we're going to continue to send our schools and where all these homicides are happening, right? We're going to continue to live in a very violent and colonized society that is extremely racist and extremely violent against our people and other people of color and other subjugated communities, marginalized communities. And the reason why it continues is because there aren't enough of us who are doing or speaking about it. So we just have to make that be part of who we are. Okay. So we're definitely.
Yeah, I also want to share that I think that a lot of us are addicted to fighting. We just fight with the wrong people, right? Some of us, we fight in front of the mirror about whether our hair looks good for the night or not, right? Pick a fight with the school system, people. Pick a fight, pick a good fight. Like, go pick a good fight. This is my second lawsuit. I sued LA Unified School District. I'm not suing the state prisons. Pick a good fight and just take them to task, right?
There you go.
Like we're all addicted to, I'm addicted to fighting. I love to fight, but I'm not going to punch my neighbor no more, right? I'm a former amateur boxer, and so I love fighting, but I don't fight with my fists anymore. My nose hurts. It's painful. I fight the system, right? I fight the system. Don't fight with yourself. Don't fight with your mom. Don't fight with your grandma. Go fight the system.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. So on that note, thank you, brothers, for being here with us today. Students, it was great to see you again. Don't forget to turn in your reflection paper. I really want to read what you have to say about today's sessions. And then for both of you, Beto and Chris, I'm going to go ahead and log off here, but you're going to use the same link to log right back on at 4:30, okay? And we'll do the same thing again. All right,
Yep.
everyone. So have a good evening. Thank you for hanging in there an extra 5 minutes, and we'll see you on Wednesday. All right. So if you want to unmute yourself to say your goodbyes and thank yous.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.